Hey y'all! So today we're going to be going back into the book Women Who Run with the Wolves, and we are going to be talking about the section in chapter 14 called The Second Stage, the Dismemberment. And this is breaking down the story, The Handless Maiden. And so I really enjoyed reading this section here. It has a lot of depth to it with regard to experiencing narcissistic abuse, psychological abuse, and how you're changed forever. So I hope that you find value in it, because I certainly did. And you know, to kind of give you an introduction to this section, remember when it says the dismemberment, it's where in the story the devil had gotten angry because the young maiden had been crying over her hands, because she knew that he was going to be coming back to get her. That was the bargain that was made between the devil and her father, who was very ignorant in this story, right? Which represents that naive part of our psyche, the uninitiated part of us, right? So she's upset. She knows the devil's coming back to get her, and that's the deal. In 3 years, and 3 is significant. She's going to go over that in myths and fairy tales, and so I found that really interesting to read about too, especially if you relate that to religion, things like that. So, but essentially, we could just go way off on a tangent, couldn't we? But essentially, the dismemberment is where the devil's angry that she's crying into her hands, so he orders the father to cut her hands off. And then when he does, she winds up still crying, and this time just on the stumps of her arms, you know, and it just goes down and it cleanses her. So he had also wanted her not to bathe, but instead, you know, she's bathed by her tears, and that's very meaningful, so it goes into that. And so the result is that we're changed. And you know, there's a lot of things that can go along with the symbolism of having the hands cut off, and she goes into that. But just to get you thinking about it and prepared for when we get to that part of this section, just all kinds of things are being naive goes. That's forever gone. The innocent part of us that trusts everybody so easily and believes in the good of all people, that goes. That's forever changed. We have to come face to face with hard truths about ourselves sometimes, like how stubborn we can be, you know. And a lot of people equate this to an ego death. And so we are forever changed by these experiences, and even though the experiences are tough, it's a beautiful change in the end. And so I also want you to consider, I think this has been mentioned in the past, we've talked about it, but you know, these stories are so, I feel like, intense and extreme. All the things that happen to the characters in these stories is extreme for a reason. Number one, I think it helps us to remember the story, you know, so that we'll remember the lesson throughout our life as we experience different things. But in reality, I think to make the connection between the story and our life, we have to understand that the story is just meant to be extreme. All the things that happen, all the things we think about is meant to be like that shock and awe type presentation, when in reality, the way all these things play out in our life is more like a delicate dance. You see what I'm saying? So we have to kind of make that connection there in order to relate and really get the wisdom, extract the wisdom from the stories. And I love the fact that this being, I don't know if it's the last story or one of the last stories. I think it's the last story in this book. I love the fact that it's really long and detailed, because that's very true of what this transformation process is like in our life, in the fact that there are no shortcuts. And that's what makes us, once we go through it all, understand the value, you know, in the transformation, in the transformative process, and especially in the results. We can see the value in it, the purpose in it, and I think that it kind of puts a lot of things in perspective too for us. So let's go ahead and dive in and see what it's got to offer for us. Okay. So she opens this section again called the second stage, the dismemberment, reminding us of 3 years to the day the devil comes to fetch the daughter of the miller, and how she had bathed and put on a white gown, all the symbolism that you find in a lot of different stories through different cultures, and how he had ordered her not to bathe, and so she devolves into an animal-like condition, but she weeps on her hands. And again, the devil cannot touch her. He orders the father to cut off her hands so she cannot weep on them. And so she continues to cry, like I said, on her stumps. And so the devil gives up. He gives up, and so, yeah, she says the daughter has done remarkably well considering the circumstances. I'll say, I mean, imagine if this was a real story. You know what I'm saying? It's like, considering the fact of the endurance that the daughter went through, the whole family really is just incredible. But again, this is all exaggerated, right? So it says, after this, our spirit reacts. Now, let me go back, make sure I didn't miss anything important. Yeah, she says that, says we are numb once we have passed through this stage and realize what has been done to us. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that sometimes we can also feel numb in the midst of what's happening to us. It's that whole frozen feeling. I feel like that's kind of in alignment with the fight, flight, flee, fawn, freeze, those kind of trauma responses. And so so maybe there's a little bit of a difference there between being frozen and then once you wake up and you realize what's going on. I think that it's probably a tactic, an unconscious effort within our psyche to prevent us from freaking out, because what has happened is our perceptions of reality have been totally shaken up. Remember, when we're naive, we believe the best, and we have these rose-colored glasses on, and in our approach to the world, being naive. And so when that's just ripped off and we're forced to see how evil operates in this world, and how dark and harmful and mean people can be, how cruel they can actually be, it could, I feel like, possibly catapult us into this horrific state of shock, possibly even, I think, what they call psychosis. I think it can rattle you to the core, to the point that you almost feel like you're going to go crazy. And so I feel like this numbness that comes over us as we're awakening to these hard truths is a protective measure that happens like an automatic kind of thing within our psyche. Sort of like, I forget what it's called, but like if somebody's going through a really horrible abusive situation in the moment, they can actually project their consciousness away and then not remember it. It's blocked. So there's all these mechanics within our psyche that happen to protect us. And so I think when she references being numb, I think that's what it's related to is, instead of freaking out about, our perception of reality being totally shattered, we just go numb for a little while. I think it's like while we process. You see what I'm saying? So it says, we are numb once we have passed through this stage and realized what has been done to us, how we surrendered to the will of the predator and the frightened father, so that we wound up being made handless. Remember, the frightened father is symbolic of the gatekeeper of the psyche, our protective part of our mind that's supposed to catch red flags and prevent us from being harmed. But when you're naive, it doesn't function properly. So she refers to that as the frightened father, the miller in the story, right? So we wind up being made handless. That's what happens. And then she's going to go into the symbolism of that. Such an incredible section here. She says, after this, our spirit reacts by moving when we move. Now look at this. Instead of the spirit leading, which I feel like is the way it should be, instead of that, the spirit is reacting. It's kind of taking a back seat. So consider that. After this, our spirit reacts by moving when we move, by reaching when we reach, by walking when we walk, but it has no feeling to it. We are numb when we realize what has come to pass. Yes. So where you got to really have that self-motivation to get yourself up and moving and get out of this this horrible place. We are horrified to fulfill our barter. We think our internal parental constructs are supposed to always be alert, responsive, and protective of the flowering psyche. And now we see what happens when they are not. 3 years pass between the making of the bargain and the devil's return. These 3 years represent a time when a woman does not have clear consciousness about the fact that she herself is the sacrifice. She is the burnt offering that has been made for some poor bargain. In mythology, the 3-year period is the time of the mounting moment, as in the 3 years of winter that precede Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods in Scandinavian mythology. In myths like these, 3 years of something occurs. Then comes a destruction. Then from that ruin is born a new world of peace. Yes, I feel like there's a lot of these stories and myths that have, been written and recorded throughout time that can be applied internally to internal processes within us, and also externally to our world, with regards to people and just the planet and existence. And that's why all this stuff just is incredibly intriguing to me. I enjoy it so much. This number of years is symbolic of the time when a woman wonders what will happen to her now, wonders if what she fears most, being totally carried off by a destructive force, is really going to occur. And that's what I would relate to, like psychosis, like just losing your mind completely, freaking out to that degree. You see what I'm saying? It's like, because everything has been shattered into little fragments in your mind, you have to really be strong to pull through this kind of stuff. She says, soon enough, energy will be stirred at last. Yeah, so you're numb, remember? You're numb for a little bit. You're probably isolated. You don't really even know what to think. And so you're in that state. And then she says, soon enough, energy will be stirred at last. Enough soul wind has been raised to cause the psychic vessel to sail far and away. So instead of the spirit leading, the spirit takes a back seat, and excuse me, and the soul comes forth. And that's where you have like La Loba, right? La que sabe, the one who knows, the old wise woman, the old hag in fairy tales. And she's brutally true with her appearance and with her knowledge and wisdom, and she's got you by the hand, and she's like, let's do this. And so the soul steps forth, and that's the enduring part of ourselves, and it's leading now that soulful part of ourselves that said, I knew it, that can acknowledge those red flags in the beginning of a situation or a relationship that you didn't want to see. This is the part of you that is strong enough to see and admit. And so it's now driving you. So then she goes into talking about time alone and how important that is. Some symbolism of numbers and stuff. And she says, it is this kind of observation of predicament and solutions that bids a woman to stay to herself. And this is right. It's like the whole processing time. For we find further in the story the maiden's task is to find the bridegroom in the underworld, not in the topside world. So how can we expect to find the one, right? The one that's going to be there with us through thick and thin in the topside world, right? The topside world meaning the materialistic, the shallow, the ego-driven, the naive part of life, layer of reality. We can't expect to find that deep connection, that soul partner there naturally. We're only going to find them in the soul level of reality, which she calls the underworld, right? Which is the title of this chapter. I love Initiation in the Underground Forest, La Selva Subterranea. Yeah. So, and she's going to get into that, and it's really beautiful to read about too. So she talks about it being hard to concentrate during this time when you're numb, hard to be productive, and she says that, it's typical. She calls it a spiritual developmental stage, right? Yes. She says, at this point in the tale, we see a fragment of the old night religions. The young woman bathes, dresses in white, draws a chalk circle around herself. It is an old goddess ritual to bathe and purify, to don the white gown, the garb of descent to the land of the dead, and to draw a circle of magic protection, sacred thought around oneself. All these the maiden does in a rather trance-like state, as though she is drawing instruction from far away in time. There is a crisis point for us when we are waiting for what we are sure will be our destruction, our ending. This causes us, like the maiden, to cock our ears toward a faraway voice coming from ancestral time, a voice that tells us how to stay strong and how to keep spirit simple and pure. I love this, because remember, our world has been shaken up, right? Our perception of reality has been fragmented. And I think that when she says, keeping the spirit simple and pure, it's kind of like you're wounded. And so you want to get back to the basics at this time. A lot of us may find that we are done with just too much in the world. You may start to shift toward more of a minimalistic lifestyle and find value in that. Find value in the mindfulness of just washing dishes, by hand. Just the simple, the old ways, which, a lot of religions and spiritual beliefs talk about, how profound simple moments can be and the value of these traditional methods and simple ways of living. So I think that it's kind of like, remember, she's talking about the spirit has taken a back seat, and it says our spirit reacts by moving when we move, by reaching when we reach. So it's like you have to, this other part of you, your soul perhaps, has to be the one to take the lead. Maybe this is where, in the outer world, you just force yourself to go walking every day. Even if you don't feel like it, you just do it because it's what's good for you. And that's what helps to, to wake your spirit up again, to strengthen your spirit. So again, all these different changes you make in your life, possibly doing away with, any excess stuff, in your life. I mean, how much clothes do we really need? For example, how much Tupperware do we really need? It's like a lot of us could probably stand to just live a lot more simply. And so I think that once we can ignite this motivation within ourselves to make these changes, that's part of what helps to heal our spirit. It's kind of like, it's just a magical connection within our psyche, where at different stages and different times in our life, different parts of us take the lead. So I hope that's getting the wheels turning for you. I hope that's very inspiring for you. So she says, if we listen to dream voices, also to images, to stories, and to our art, so anything that you may do that brings you peace, any kind of creative acts that you may be involved in, right? Creative things. If we listen to those who have gone before and to each other, something will be handed out to us, even several somethings that are ritual, personal, psychological, right, that serve to steady this stage of the process. I like books like this, right? Just structure. I think giving ourselves structure sometimes instead of approaching everything so open-ended, it kind of helps, get through this time where we're trying to reformat, our understanding of reality. Structure helps. This is the task, to return through the mists of time to the place of Laki Sabe, who is expecting us. She has extensive underworld teachings for us that will be of great value to our spirits and to us in the outer world. In the old religions, dressing oneself in purity and preparing for one's death makes one immune and accessible to evil. Placing the old protection of the wild mother about oneself, the chalk circle, enables our psychological descent to continue without swerving off course, without our vitality being extinguished by the devilish opposing force of the psyche. All right, I'm going to share with you what I think about this little paragraph here. She says, dressing oneself in purity and preparing for one's death makes one immune and inaccessible to evil. I feel like you could take this to mean facing like an ego death, meaning accepting the parts of you that are not perfect, because none of us are perfect, right? So just taking a hard look at yourself, like maybe a critical person would, a mean and critical person, and saying, yeah, okay, this or this or this about me. Not things that about your values, or your character, because you want to change that. You want to be the best person you can be and always be in a state of growing. That's a good thing. But I'm talking about the things you can't change, maybe like physical appearance, or just different characteristics, right? And taking a look at the things you can change too. That's extremely important. But my point is facing the vulnerabilities when you're within yourself that a mean person would point out. Do you see what I'm saying? If you can make peace with that yourself first, then you're not going to be bothered. It says you're inaccessible to evil. You're not going to be bothered by a narcissistic person trying to use your vulnerabilities against you. Does that make sense? I don't know. I don't feel like I explained that well. I know what I was trying to say. Maybe you got the gist of it. So then she says, here we are, all dressed up and as protected as we can be, awaiting our fate. But the maiden weeps, cries on her hands. At first, when the psyche cries unconsciously, we are unable to hear it except for a feeling of helplessness that comes over us. Yes, I can relate to that when you're in the midst of these hard times. The maiden continues to weep. Her tears are a germination of that which preserves her, that which purifies the wound she has received. C.S. Lewis wrote about the bottle of child's tears that heals any wound with just one drop. Tears in mythos melt the icy heart. That reminds me of the song from Frozen. Like I recommended the soundtracks in those movies, in the lyrics it says, beware the frozen heart. Yes, exactly. So tears in mythology melt the frozen heart, melt the icy heart. Thought that was really interesting. In the Inuit story, the stone child, a boy's hot tears cause a cold stone to break open, releasing a protective spirit. In the tale Mary Culhane, the demon who has seized Mary cannot enter any house where there are tears cried by a true heart. These he considers holy water. All through history, tears have done three works: called the spirits to one side, repelled those who would muffle and bind the simple soul, and healed the injuries of poor human bargains. There are times in a woman's life when she cries and cries and cries, and even though she has the succor and support of her loved ones, still and yet she cries. Something in this crying keeps the predator away, keeps away unhealthy desire or gain that will ruin her. Tears are part of the mending of rips in the psyche where energy has leaked and leaked away. The matter is serious, but the worst does not occur. Our light is not stolen. That reminds me of that Bible verse, nothing can come between the love of God and us, nothing. So if you just relate that on a spiritual level, I thought it was cool. It's like you feel like your light's dwindling, right? But it's still there. It's still there. We just have to, let it take that back seat until we can kind of build back up again, right? Stoke the fire, so to speak. Yes, the matter is serious, but the worst does not occur. Our light is not stolen, for tears make us conscious. There is no chance to go back to sleep when one is weeping. Yes, because as long as you're crying over something, you're acknowledging, right? You're admitting. You're not suppressing or ignoring. Whatever sleep comes then is only rest for the physical body. I love that, yes. Sometimes a woman says, I'm sick of crying, I'm tired of it, I want it to stop. But it is her soul that is making tears, and they are her protection. So she must keep on till the time of need is over. So yes, we have to feel our feelings in order to heal, right? It's crucial. It's a multi-level, multi-layered, meaningful experience, and ultimately crucial for our healing. Yes, so it says the devil tries to approach the daughter and cannot, for she has both bathed and cried. He admits his power is weakened by such holy water and demands she no longer bathe. But rather than this debasing her, it has the opposite effect. She begins to resemble an animal power then, the underlying wildish nature. And this, too, is protection. It may be at this stage that a woman takes less or a different sort of interest in her appearance. She may go about dressed more like a tangle of twigs than a person. As she contemplates her plight, many former preoccupations recede. Yes. So we get real about what matters and what are just distractions out there. You know what I'm saying? Like, just unimportant, not worth our time. Yes, I love this. I love how she says, many former preoccupations recede. Absolutely. The devil thinks that if the maiden became unbathed and dirty, then he would be able to rob her of herself, but just the opposite happens. For the sooty woman, the mud woman, is beloved by the wild woman and protected by her unequivocally. It would appear that the predator does not understand that his prescriptions only put her closer to her powerful wild nature. And that reminds me of another verse that says, God works all things for the good of those who love him. So that's where you can't outsmart God, the devil. He's never going to win. All the tactics, and again, apply your own lens if you don't practice spirituality. Please, I just hope you still get the same message, through your lens. But yes, as a Christian, as a spiritual person, that's how I see this, is that it's still going to benefit us, and it's what's meant to harm us is ultimately can be used for elevating us, for making us more, expanding us, so that more beautiful things can come to fruition in our lives. So I was just reminded of that. Wanted to share it with you. It says, the devil cannot come close to the wildish self. Being thus has a purity that eventually repels thoughtless or destructive energy. Yes. The combination of this and her pure tears prevents access to the vile thing that wishes her doom, so it can live more fully. How interesting. Yes, because narcissists are hollow beings, and they live to consume. They're very materialistic. And so when it says her tears prevent access to the vile thing that wishes her doom, so it can live more fully, it's kind of like that's how they operate. They can't not only feel good about themselves, but it's almost like they can't even feel okay enough about themselves to just go on in life without putting another person down. It's just a constant life of competitiveness and having to view everything as either or. Remember, not like an and, not like a both and and, not like healthy people want to do good for themselves in life and see others do good. That's what a healthy person wants for themselves and others. But an unhealthy person, is looking through the lens of black and white thinking, and it's like they can't conceive that, both of you can do well in life, and that's good. It's like you have to be down here so that they can be up here. So again, they're just very hollow, and she mentions even the loss of energy we read about, and it's like they're just sucking that life force out of you, and the fire is dwindling down, but remember, it doesn't go away. So then she gets into talking about losing the hands, right? Which is what the section is titled after, the dismemberment. And this is so rich. I had actually highlighted, I went ahead and read this entire section and stopped just before the third stage. And I've marked it up, but I'm kind of debating on how much more time this will take, because I don't want this to be a super long video. I think I'll go ahead and stop and break this section up into 2 videos just for time's sake, and we'll start the next video talking specifically about the maiden losing her hands and the symbolism of that. Remember, she gets the silver hands in place of her hands, and how all that goes down in the story. So she breaks all that down, and it's really cool to talk about. So very meaningful. So hope that you got a lot out of this today. I hope that you enjoyed today's presentation. I very much enjoyed filming this for you and going through all this with you. So I hope you have a beautiful day, and I will see you again very soon.